Hilchas Toen V'Nitan Perik Shnei Moser. The Rambam continues in the halachas of Cheskas Karkois that we learned before that in order to become a muhzik in Karka, that there was a marakama, you have to be there for Sholosh Shanim Ritzufis. But the question is, does it mean Sholosh Shanim mamish 3 years every single day, or 3 years not necessarily every day? So it depends. There's two types of Karka. There's a Karka which produces every day, like a house. A house, every day you can live in that house. So maybe if you have 3 years minus 1 day, you didn't have the full 3 years. Masha'inkin, if you have a field that has trees in it, and you harvest the field once a year, you harvest the trees once a year, so the 3 years are not going to get 3 full years. It's going to get that it should be shalish tvuis, the 3 sets of produce that the field produces, and that would also be shalish shon. That's the halacha we learned here in the beginning of Perish Nemos. Perish Nemos. Shalish shonim shamarnu, when you say 3 years, it means miyem liyem. Means full 3 years. There's 1 day missing from those 3 years. Is lei hivzik. That's not considered chazak, and therefore you take the magzik, your masalik from him, and you bring the morikama there. But medvarim that you need to have full 3 years, and if you're missing 1 day, you're missing the 3 years. That's talking about bekarkoi shenesin peiros tomit, type of karka which produces peiros on a regular basis. Kigen habatim, a house. V'achatzeres or v'haberes v'asichnu v'amores, which you're storing things in it, you're taking water from it, so that's on an everyday basis. V'chanuyes or v'hapandukois, v'hamerchetzois, v'hashevches, or bati abadim. All these things are things which produce every day. You know, every day you use it. You use it every day, and therefore that's considered a produce of every day. Or stei shalchem. Stei shalchem means it's a soda shemashken eser tomid. You're constantly watering, irrigating the field. And v'zeirimba, and you're constantly planting in it, v'neitin, and you plant zroim in it, or you plant trees into it, or v'haganis, v'hapardesim. These are the type of things which are used on a daily basis. And therefore, if you're missing 1 day of the 3 years, it means you didn't have full 3 years. You only had 3 years minus whatever you're missing. V'chein ha'avodim ha'mahalchin k'mesha b'yarnu, which the Rambam earlier said that avodim also there's a musig of cheskes shalosh shanim. The Rambam said it when he was speaking about cheskes metaltlin. We discussed whether we're talking about dafka avodim or also other metaltlin. But I'll call upon him v'chein ha'avodim ha'mahalchin k'mesha b'yarnu. So a cheskes shalosh shanim and avodim would mean 3 full years, because lepel an eved could be used every day. So if you're missing 1 day, it means you didn't have full 3 years. Aval stei abal, we're talking about a field which is called stei abal, not a stei ashalchem, which is shishesa make shalom bilvad. You don't irrigate that field. That field is irrigated by rain, or v'stei or a field of trees, which again it doesn't produce peiros every day. You're not doing something with it every day. So the din is einam over there. Cheska shalosh shanim doesn't mean cheska shalosh shanim full 3 years miyem liyem. Elikiv and sha'achal shalosh tvuos mimin echad. From one type of food, you had three produces, 3 tvuos. So then is arei l'kishalosh shanim ketzad. Hoysa stayed tomorrow. It was a tree that had palm trees, had dates, and v'gada shalosh gederis, and you went ahead and had 3 harvests of these dates. Oy stay anovim, or it was a vineyard. Ubatzer shalosh psiris. It's the zaysim. It was a soda of olives. Umasik shalosh musikis. Is these arei l'kishalosh shanim? That's already considered 3 years. The fact that you had 3 times, you produced peiros for 3 times. And then the hirzik, that's also called the chazaka. In other words, the chazaka doesn't necessarily have to be 3 years. It has to be 3 times that it produced. Afilu hoya hilanis ritzufim, v'li hoya b'neim herchikaroi, shari seifim livash. You have trees, and they're planted very, very close to each other. So eventually those trees will really, it'll dry out. Because you can't have trees which are planted next to each other. There's not enough for it to nurture from the ground. And eventually, since right now the trees are there, and lepel, you're eating from those trees, so therefore, and 3 times it produced, so the din is that's considered a chazaka. Hail v'akal shalosh shanim, if you ate it for 3 years, it's considered a chazaka. Halacha beis. Nahevi edim shahaya dar b'chatzer zu shalosh shanim. You bring edim that you've been living in this chatzer for 3 years, eshesachar shalosh shanim, or you rented out this field for 3 years. Is arezu chazaka? That's considered a chazaka because lepel, you've been there for 3 years. Now, Toen Balachotzer va'amar shemen lishachem b'bayim balayla. So normally, when you come along, you have edim that you've been living in this field, in this chotzer for 3 years. So that's considered a chazaka. You lived there for 3 years, and so the mele you become the muzik. Now, what happens if the Morikama Tainas, you were there for 3 years, but you weren't there, Shema, even though he's not Tainas Vade, Shema, Lehoy Shachim Babayim Balayla. Maybe you were only there during the days, but not Bayim Ubalayla. A Shema Elu Shiskiru Lahem, maybe the people that you rented it to them is also Lishachnu Babayim Balayla. They weren't there by day and by night. So in other words, you're Taina, you have a Cheskel Shalosh Shanim, and you have Edom that you've been there for 3 years, and now the original Morikam is Taina. You have Edom, you were there for 3 years, but they don't know you were there at night. So the din is Arezu Taina, because Lepil, since we just learned that it has to be Shalosh Shanim full 3 years, so full 3 years means not minus a day at the end of the 3 years, and also it doesn't mean minus the nights during the 3 years, so it has to be day and night. So Zarezu Taina, that is a Taina of the Marikama, and therefore Va'imra L'Mavzik, Oy Havi Edim, Shishan Meilu Gmuris, which means by Yema Balayla, either you bring Edim that you were there by day and by night, Tistalik, or you leave. Because Lepil, you have to produce Edim that you've been there for 3 years, and the fact that you've been there for 3 years and you don't have a raya, you've been there at night, and the original Morikama is taining Shema, he wasn't there at night, so Memele, you have to produce Edim that you were there at night as well. Now 2 people come along and says, he rented us this karka, if we've been there by day and by night, so they're taining that they were the people that rented this field, and they were there by Yem Balayla. So the din is tzrichem elu ha'edim ha'seichrim lohavi rayas shedar b'tamid. They have to bring rayas. They can't say that they were there by day and by night. That's not enough. It's not enough for them to say that they were there by day and by night. They have to bring other edim other than them to bring a raya that they were there by yom balayla. Why? Shezeh davar toli bahem, because this davar is toli bahem. Ve'eni toli b'tainas hamavzik kedei she'idulei. So the Rambam, it's not so clear what the Rambam is saying over here. The Rambam is saying, these Eidim are saying Eidim what happened with them, that they've been there for 3 years, and they've been there by Yema Balayla. Now, L'chura, the Pashas in Gemara, and that's what the Ravid also says, that it depends if they paid rent already. Because if they already paid rent to the person that rented it to them, so it's negate to them that the person that rented it to them should become the musik. Because like this, the original owner is going to month from them rent. So if they have the rent, this comes out from the Gemara, if they have the rent in their hands, and they're saying, listen, we haven't paid rent yet, and L'meila, we don't really care who's going to become the owner of this item, but we're saying that this person rented it to us, and we've been there by Yema Balayla. So L'meila, basically they're saying, we're not in the Gebedover, but on the other hand, we're saying, hey, this about this person, so L'chura, then it helps. Masha'ekin, if they already paid rent, and now they're coming along and saying that we've been there by Yema Balayla, so L'meila, L'chura, they're in the Gebedover, because if they paid rent, so by saying that they were there by Yom Balayla, so this person that rented it to them is going to become the muzik, and Mamela, the original owner, is not going to have a tiny to them. And that's really what the Ravid Sa'ar is on the Rambam. The Rambam doesn't mention anything about rent or not rent. Lepil, the Rambam doesn't mention anything about rent. The Rambam seems to say that even if they paid rent, even if they didn't pay rent rather, the Rambam just saying they have no right to say Edis about themselves. The question is why not? Because they're talking about themselves, but it's not negate to them. That would be the issue. The deal in Mefarshim, what's pshat in the Rambam? The Rambam is saying, Elu Eidim Haseichem L'Havi Raya, they have to bring Eidim that they were there for 3 years. Why? Shezeh Dover Toli Bahen. Ve'eni Toli B'Tainus HaMavzik K'dei She'idulei. The Pashta pshat in the Rambam is that, in other words, the original, the person that rented it to them, which he's the one that wants to become the Mavzik, he doesn't really know that they were there for 3 years. Some shot, he's tiny that they were for 3 years, and they're coming along and saying, yeah, it's true that we were there for 3 years. He doesn't know that they were there for 3 years. He knows that he rented to them for 3 years. And they're coming along and saying, and the original owner is tiny, but maybe the renters weren't there for Bayem Balayla. So now the renters are saying, we were there by Yom Balayla. So they're coming with a taina, which when you come with a taina and you say something for the original person, something maybe even about yourself, but that person is tining, and you're just helping, you're supporting his taina. So then you could say, hey, this may be about yourself. But over here, that person doesn't even have that taina. That person, all he says is that I rented it to these people. And these people are saying that we were there for Bayim Balayla. So it's like their own taina. And it's their own taina about themselves. So you have to understand why. But for some reason, that's not considered edus. When they're coming along and they're saying, a taina, as saying something which is not really, even the original person, the magzik, doesn't know it. That's what Lashon Haram is. Shezah dover toli behen. It depends on them, and they have to be the ones that are saying that they were there by Yom Balayla. Ve'ini toli b'tainis hamagzik. The magzik doesn't know that they were, but Yom Balayla kadei she'idolei, that they're being made for him. They're made for him. They're made something about themselves on their own accord, which is going to help him, not to substantiate the taina that he has, because he doesn't have a taina. He doesn't know that they were there by Yom Balayla, and for that reason, their edus wouldn't be a good edus. That seems to be the Lashon Haram. Shal is, how does it shim with the Gemara? The Gemara talks about something else, whether he has the rent or he doesn't have the rent. Halachi Gimel. Now normally we say when a person comes along and says that we were there by Yom Balayla, I rented it to people that were there by the person says I was there for 3 years. So we assume that since he was there for 3 years, he has a chazaka, cheska shalosh shanim. If the marikam tainas, maybe he wasn't there balayla, so then he has to bring a raya about balayla. But pashas, he doesn't have to bring a raya about balayla. However, hoya zeh hamagzik ha'edim shedaruba min horeichlim hamachazim bayoris ukiyetzivan, that these people were from the edim hamachazim bayoris. So mainly the pashtus advarim is that they weren't there for full 3 years. So then it's tayin neisen l'chatchila. So then we tie it to them l'chatchila. In other words, we don't have to wait for the Morikama to tie to bring me a raya that they were there full 3 years. Since these people are people which generally we could assume they weren't there a whole time, so therefore the Bezdin already, when he brings a raya that they've been there for 3 years, we also tie it right away that maybe he wasn't there for full 3 years, and therefore kshiyav eideh chazaka, when the magzik comes along with his eideh chazaka, emrulei havi edim shayim magzik b'bayim balayla. They have to bring edim that they were magzik b'bayim balayla. So the din is that in order to be a magzik in a bias, you have to be there bayim ubalayla. And the morikama kataina, bring me a raya, you were there bayim balayla. Bring me a raya that the renters were there bayim balayla. That's the taina. And lepel, if we're dealing with people that are rechla machazim bayoris, we don't need that the Morikama should taina bring me a raya that they were there by Yom Balayla. We ourselves taina on behalf of the Morikama that the Magzik's raya that he rented it for 3 years, or he's been using it for 3 years, is not enough. He has to bring a raya that he was there by Yom Balayla. Now, by Medvar Mamurim, that you have to use it by Yom Balayla, and only then is there a chazaka, that's only b'chatzeres u'batim u'keitzibim. Shein asuyis loder b'teichem by Yom Balayla. It's a regular thing that when you use it by Yom Balayla. And if you weren't there by Laila, means you didn't have full use. Aval chanuya shel tagrim, stores u'keitzibim, which shein dorim, and people don't live there, they just do business there, and they do business by day. And shein dorim b'hem ela bayim, they're only there during the day. Is kivin shedor b'shol shonim, so there bayim, so then is harezu chazak. Taka doesn't have to be there at night, because since the normal way of living there is only by day, so having there 3 years of days is also considered a chazak. Halacha dalet. 3 years has to be consecutive 3 years. So he was mavzik in the soda, how he planted it for a year, and then he vira shana. He left it fallow, he left it empty, he didn't do anything in it for a year, and then vizara shana, and then again he planted it a year, and then vihivira shana, afilo also came kama shana, that went many years, more than 3 years. But nevertheless, since it wasn't consecutive years, it was 1 year he planted, he used it, and the other year he left it empty. He didn't do it. He was a vira. So then is lehirzik. However, hoyedarkan shel bnei esi amokim lehiver. The derech was that people do leave the field empty for a year. In other words, they don't use the field. They leave it fallow for a year in order for it to get more. It should regenerate and therefore have more keches for the next year. Hoya darkan shel bnei esi amokim lehiver is afal pishem miksasen zayden shana achashana umiksasen zayden shana bevirim shana. Not everyone is moiver. Not everyone leaves it fallow. Only some people, but there are some people that do it. It's a normal thing. So then is areza hirzik. But the hirzik is not by 3 years with 1 year fallow. It means areza hirzik with shalish shalim of produce, even though in the middle there was fallow. It was fallow. Shaharei huemer lehi varti. The only reason why I left fallow is not because I wasn't using it. I wanted to use it. But lepel, I wanted to use it and I wanted to produce better. So therefore I left it. I didn't plant it for a year in order for it to regenerate and have more keich for the coming years. So again, if you do 3 years, it has to be 3 consecutive years. But if it's the derech of Esi Amokim that they leave it fallow for a year, so then he can have 3 years of produce, even though amongst those 3 years there was 2 years of leaving it fallow. Halacha hey. Now we said that it has to be 3 consecutive years. Now what happens if you have 2 shutfim, and 2 shutfim work together, and one shutf uses it 1 year, and the next shutf uses it the other year? So each shutf didn't really have consecutive years. Shnei shutfim she'ebziku b'soda sheishon. Harishon oklo rishena u'shlishas v'chamishes, and v'hasheni oklo shniya u'revias v'shishas. So nobody really used, these 2 people are shutfim together, and lepel, they went ahead into a field. One used it the first, third, and fifth, and the other one used it the second, fourth, and sixth. So the question is, are they established shutfim? Is it known that they're shutfim? Is that say? Shnei shutfim she'evziku b'soda sheishon. Rishon oklo rishena u'shlishas v'chamishes. V'asheni oklo shniya u'revias v'shishas. So the din is le'osa chazaka lechem. Neither of them have a chazaka. Shariba la'karka emer kivin sh'leriisi v'lishamayti she'ivzik ba'odom echad shon achar shon v'pnei zela machisi. When is a person expected to be meicha? When he hears that there's one person using it for 3 consecutive years. So during those 3 consecutive years, he should have been meicha. Masha'inkin over here, he never heard one person using it for 3 consecutive years. He heard Reuven using it 1 year, Shimon using it another year, Reuven using it another year. So mainly that really didn't warrant that he should be meicha. Lefichach, that's only talking about if they're not official shutfim. Lefichach im kosvu elu ashutfim shtar b'nei. There's a star speaking about the shutfis. Sheishtamshu b'shon achar shon. So there's a star discussing their shutfis in this field. This kim sha'avra shalosh shanim. Once 3 years passes, is oslam chazaka. Why? Shashtar kel yeshlei. The star has a kel, so everyone knows that these 2 people are in this field as a shutf. The hail v'leimicha, after 3 years, where they use it as shutfim. Einachinami, one of them used it the first year, the second one used it the second year, but they used it as shutfim. So therefore, we combine their usage. And hail v'leimicha is avad eschusei. V'hu adin le'eved shehichziku beishnayim v'shnam shebeishon achashana. And we said before that in an eved there's also a din of cheska shalushanim. So again, so if there was no star, so one person used it 1 year, the other one used it another year, that's not considered a chazaka. However, in Kosvu, star b'neim, if they did write a star, so then harir ziku, that is considered a proper chazaka. Halacha Vov. Ochla shana zeh hamachzik. The machzik first ate it for a year. For a year he used the field. And then umochra, and then he went and sold it. V'ochla lekech shana, then the lekech went and used it for another year. And then umochra lekech sheni, and then this first lekech went and sold it to another lekech. V'ochla shana, and he ate it for a year. So the pale was used for 3 years. One first by the first person, then by someone that bought from him, and then another year from the person that bought from him. So Zazoi, im mochru zelu zeh b'shtar. If lepel there was a star between the 3 of them, and it was the first marzik sold it to a star to the lekech rishon, and the lekech rishon sold it with a star to the lekech sheni. So then it is mitzarfim. So we look at all 3 together as one thing because there's a hemshich to it. In other words, they used it as a hemshich. They used it because he bought it from each other. Just like we learned before b'negei shutfim. If there's a star saying that they're shutfim, so we look at it as being one thing. So even though he used it 1 year and he used it another year, but those 2 and the other one used it again the 3rd year, so then they're combined and it's considered a cheska shalushanim. So over here also, since the Magzik gave it with a star to the lekech gave it a star to another lekech, so we look at all 3 years as one siruf, and therefore the mistarfim. Varizu chazaka, nipnei shalei micha, because the marikama shouldn't be mecha, because he sees that there was one usage of 3 years, which was one hemshach. However, v'machri shalei b'shtar, if the sale was without a star, is a chazaka. I wasn't aware that there was any connection between these 2 people. I saw one person using it a year. Now I see another person using it another year, and lepel, I don't see a connection. So therefore, that didn't bring out by me that I should be mecha. And therefore, there was need to be mecha. As we say, that when it's less than 3 years and he's not mecha, that's not a time. Now, this was talking about the Magzik. The Magzik gave it to a lekeach, and a lekeach to a lekeach acher. Now, ochlo ha'av shon of aben shtayim. Someone went into a field and he was there for 1 year. Then he died. And lepel, now the ben ate it for another 2 years. Or ha'av shtayim v'aben shona. or Av Shana, Vaben Shana, Valakeach, Min Aben Shana, we're talking about the Lekeach was the Lekeach with a star, like the Rambam say, is Arezu Chazok, and Vu Shalachim B'Shtar. Because again, when you see a karka being used 3 years, and they're with one Hamshach, in other words, they're based on one Inyan, there was a father, and he had a son, and Memela, the son is using the B'Hamshach to the father, and the Lekeach is using the B'Hamshach to the Ben. And Lepel, you know that the Lekeach is B'Hamshach to the Ben, because there was a star. So then again, it's considered a Chazak. Halacha Ches. Before we were talking about the Av and the Ben, that they were the Marzik. First, the Av was the Marzik, and then the Ben was the Marzik. There was a Hamshach to the Av of being a Marzik. Over here, we're talking about the Marikama. There was first the Marzik started eating the field before in front of the Marikama, the Av. He was only there a year. Then the father died, and then the Ben he continued eating this karka b'fnei Ben another 2 years. So the din is that since there's an Av and a Ben, it's in the same field, and the Ben Vaisish knows, we're talking about a Ben that is a God, not a Ben that's a cotton. He knows that this person has been there for 3 years, and he knows that this karka once belonged to his father. So Mela, if he wouldn't have been aware that this was sold, so he should have been Meicha Vaisish. That's the Havanas Advarim. We assume the Ben knows that this karka was his father's, and Lepel, he should have been Meicha, seeing that this person has been sitting in this field for 3 years. That's this din. Halacha Ches. Achla b'fnei ha'av, shel yibal hasoda shana. A person sat down, was in a field, and the Bal HaSoda, the original Bal HaSoda, he used it for a year, and then that person died. And then b'fnei b'nei shnayim, and then he continued using the field for another 2 years after he dies in front of the b'nei, which is a b'nei agodl. Oy b'fnei ha'av shtayim, b'fnei ha'ben shana. Oy b'fnei ha'av shana, b'fnei b'nei shana, and b'fnei ha'lekeach min ha'ben shana. And there was a lekeach min ha'ben, and it was a shana. So he ends up using it for 3 years. So again, there was a father, and then he was a son, and then he went ahead and sold it. So the din is harezu chazak. Now l'chura, if the person went ahead and sold it, so l'chura made a macha. That in itself is a macha. So you say l'chura, the whole din of shalosh shanim is only if there was no macha of the marikam. But over here, l'chura, there was a macha, because again, he started making a chazak b'chayav, and then he continued the chazaka b'chaya ben, and then the ben went ahead and sold it to lekech. So l'chura, the sale of the ben to lekech is a macho and the chazaka. So how could it be 3 years? So that he says, v'hu shemacher aben sodazu b'chlal sodesav. He didn't go ahead and sell this particular field. He went ahead and sold all his fields, and it's known also that he owned this field. Sharei hikir hamagzik shenimkra. Whereas the magzik doesn't see that there was macho on that field, because he didn't hear him being moich on this field. And on the other hand, the person that bought the field, since he knows that all these fields belong to the original owner, he should have been moich on this magzik. Now, again, you have a field that Reuven sat down in a field, and he's been there for a year. And Lepel, this field belonged to Shimon. Now Shimon dies, after a year Shimon dies, and now Shimon's children are there, or Shimon's children. And they weren't moich. Another year was for Shimon's children. Now Shimon's children went ahead and sold all their father's fields, all their fields. And amongst that field is also this field. And now this lekeach, l'chura, should have been meicha about this field. That we're assuming here that the lekeach obviously knows that this field belonged to the father of this seller and to the son. And now this person has been using it for 3 years. So the buyer should have been meicha in this 3rd year. The buyer should have been meicha. The fact that he sold it to him, that was in itself a macha. The answer is no. He sold it to him without specifying that he's selling this field. If he would be specifying that he's selling this field, so that in itself would have been a macha. Masha'inkin, the fact that he sold the fields is not really a macha on behalf of the son, because he didn't specify that it was this field. But on the other hand, the buyer should have been aware. The buyer, Pasha, we're assuming that he's aware the fields of the seller. So he's aware of all the fields of the seller. And Lepel, this was one of the fields that once belonged to the seller's father, so the chura belongs to the seller, and Lepel, the buyer, wasn't mecha. So obviously it means, why wasn't he mecha? He wasn't mecha because Lepel, they know that there was a sale here. That's the Avanas Advan. Let's read it again. That's Pasha. I'm sorry. Akla b'fnei av shoy bal asad shana b'fnei bnei shnayim b'fnei av shtayim b'fnei ben shana. So that's possible. So it's together, and since they weren't meicha, so therefore we assume, we're assuming the ben is a gadol, so therefore that's considered like the father wasn't meicha. It was like there was no macha for 3 years. Or another case, which is a little harder, b'fnei av shana, b'fnei bnei shana, and b'fnei lekech min ben shana. The son sold the field, and lepel, this lekech didn't make a macho. Is harezu chazaka. Now, l'chura, what do we need l'chura by the fact that the son sold the field and itself was a macho? The answer is no. V'hu shemacher aben sodazu b'chal sodesav. We're talking about that there was no specific macho on this field. The ben sold this field b'chal sodesav. Shalihikar hamuzik shenimkara. The person that was sitting in this field didn't hear a macho about this field because the son didn't sell this field particular. He just sold the field stam. L'fichach le'nizer b'shtari. If the ben would have sold this field b'fnei atzmei, is then ein lecha macho g'dei lemizu, and therefore that would have been considered macho. So again, the din is that if a person is mavzik in a field, and there's a father mavzik in a field in front of someone for a year, and then that person dies, and now his mavzik continues being mavzik in front of his son for another year, and lepel, that son goes ahead and sells all his fields, and now the lekech has all his fields, and lepel, there was no macho made on this field. So therefore he says that since there was no macho made on this field, so therefore I was a matzah for 3 years. Who should have made a macho? The lekech should have made a macho. How could the lekech make a macho? Because he knows that he's buying all the fields of this ben, and lepel, well, he has to be mavar. What are all the fields? So obviously, if this field was considered part of the nechasim of the ben and part of the nechasim of the original father, and it wasn't sold, so the lekech should have made a macho. And the fact that the lekech didn't make a macho, it must have been that the lekech knew that this field belonged to this machzik, and therefore he didn't make a macho, and therefore it's considered a proper chazak. Halacha tes nora shana acher shana. You plowed it 1 year after the other. Afila kama shana, more than 3 years. Aberheil v'li nanaba. Since you weren't nana, you were just plowing the field. There's a chazaka. V'chein pasuk b'shvili amayim. If a person opened up shvili amayim into the field, he brought irrigation into the field. Again, he didn't take any produce from the field. He was like irrigating the field. Or pasach v'shadad bovad. Pasach v'shadav means he plowed the field and then he went ahead and broke up the pieces of the clumps of earth. That's the pasach means he plowed the field. He opened up the earth and v'shadad, and then he broke up the clumps of earth that came with the plowing. The nekuda is that since he didn't have any payers, he didn't take any produce out of the field. Therefore, ein chazaka. Halacha yud zara v'lei hirviach klum. He planted it. But lepel, there was no, he had no gain. Elazara kur v'asav kur. He planted, he invested a kur of zroim into the karka, and lepel, all he did was harvest a kur. Is also lehichzik shareli nana. In order to make a chazaka, you have to be nana from the karka. Mashenkin, if you're getting out of the karka the same amount that you put into the karka, that's not called nana min a karka, and therefore that doesn't constitute a chazaka. Halacha yudalef ochlu shachas. Shachas is like the type of grass that grows when it first starts becoming tfuah. In other words, before the tfuah actually gets stalks and starts having kernels inside, so there's like a grassy substance which is called shachas. So the din is lehichzik, because lepel, the normal uses is that you plant it and it grows regular tfuah. Mashengen, if you're cutting it as shachas, that's lehichzik. If it was normal that in this area they plant things to shachas, because in that area shachas was something expensive, so therefore they would plant the tfuah and then cut it shachas and then plant again, and always cutting the shachas. So the din is harezu chazak. Achla orla shvias v'kalai. So a person ate an orla, so l'chura orla is not really royal achila. It's asur b'ano. Now there is a shvias, he ate it on shvias, in other words, he came into the karka and he acted as if he's the balabas on shvias, and really he shouldn't be doing this. It's asur. And also there was kalayim planted there, or he planted kalayim there. Lepel b'kitzer, while he was he was being nana in the field, he was being nana b'isser, is afal pisha nana ba'aveda, even though these anos were ba'aveda. In other words, he was collecting the arla, he was running the field on shvias, or using kalaya kerem, or kalayim. Nevertheless, arezu chazak. Halacha yud gimel. Haya hamokim shehichzik beisel le'ichalamish. So how would he have a chazak in such a field? So to make a chazaka, you have to be using that area. Now you can't plant because the area can't be planted, but you use the area in a way that would be normally used for 3 years. That's called a chazaka. He spreads out the pears over there to dry. He uses it to keep his behemoths there. So notice if there's an area which that area can't be planted, it can't be planted. And Lepel, he wants to make a chazak in that area. The chazak in that area, or the question is, does he have a chazak in that area? So that is, if he used that area, not taka by planting, but the type of things that you would normally use that area, and you used it for 3 years. Someone has a chatzar, and he would go and take his behema and be maimed bechatzar chaver in a specific area. There was a specific area in chatzar chaveri where he was raising chickens. A maimed sham tanur v'kirayim v'rechaim, where you put over there a mill, you put over there ovens or kirayim, eishnasim sham zivlei, or he's using a specific area in someone else's chatzar to keep his zevel, to keep his animal waste. Is ben shehamid mechitza, ben shalei hamid, whether he made a mechitza between that area which he was using and the rest of the chatzar, or he didn't make a mechitza. Either way, im nishtamish b'dvarim elu k'yetzvem, shol ishana b'yem u'balayla, he used it for consecutive 3 years and full 3 years, and v'ton al ba'al ha'chatzar v'amar atin usata li mokim zeh, or atin mecharta li arezu chazaka. So in other words, the din of chazaka, normally we think of chazaka that this piece of land became yours and it's separated from anyone else's piece of land. Over here, this is an area within someone else's chatzar. So now we say also an area within someone else's chatzar, even though there's no mechitza between this area and the rest of the chatzar, but nevertheless, if you used it for 3 years, and 3 years means consecutive years and by day and by night. Whereas you have it, you've been using it, and you don't have to be there by day and by night. But let's say if you're storing zevel there, so the zevel is there by day and by night, and there is you're raising chickens, etc. You have your items there, or you have behemoths over there by day and by night, and you're timing that the person sold it to you. So the din is harezu chazak. Halacha tezvav, soda shehi mukefes geder. You have a soda which is surrounded with a geder, and then ubazeh shehirzik ba v'zora chutz l'geder. So there was an area outside this geder which also belonged to the same person that owned the soda. And Lepel, this person went ahead and he was nana with that area outside the geder. V'nana b'chol mokim she'ein shomer. He was nana in that area which wasn't shomer inside the geder. Is afal pisha achli shana achar shana. He used it for many years. Why? Shabaylim ten and ve'emrim. The question is, the chazaka is based, as we learned before, why wasn't the bailim moicha? So the fact that the bailim wasn't moicha, that's the yisod advarim, why the bailim should lose his cheskas marikama. But over here, you're asking why wasn't the bailim not moicha? Because he was using something which was outside of the chatzar. Then anyways, he's not going to be nana from it because the chayas are going to come and eat it. So therefore, he didn't feel that it was something that was a reasonable use, which he has to be mecha. That's what he's saying. Shabaylim ten ve'emrim kivin shiriyenu shezireh b'mokim mufker. He's being zireh in a place which is l'chatchila mokim mufker. Armarna kol mashazora. Anyways, chayas asoda tichlanu. Ulefichach le'machisi. He's anyways not going to be nana. So even though Lepel it ended up that the chayas didn't eat it, and Lepel he ate it for 3 years, but nevertheless he has an excuse of why he wasn't mecha. And since he has an excuse of why he wasn't mecha, so therefore that's not considered that he wasn't mecha, and it helps the other person's chazaka. If a person owns an area which is not shomer, and someone else comes and uses that area, so again, so the person that owns the karka, the marikama kataina, the reason why I wasn't mecha is because I see you're using an area which anyways bepashtus you're not going to be nana from it, so therefore that's not going to constitute a chazaka. Halacha tezayin. Achla kula chutz beis reva. He used the entire field, but he left over a beis reva akav. So the din is hirze bekula chutz beis reva. Whereas if he left over an area which is less than a beis reva, so that area, since it's so small, so it's bottled to the soda, even though he didn't use it, but he used the rest of the soda, even though he left over an area, a small area, but since it's less than a beis reva, it's considered completely not choshev, and therefore it's batal agav the soda. But if the area is a beis reva, so then we say that it's not batal agav the soda, and since he didn't use it, so taka, the chazaka is not chal on this. That's this dinner. Halacha design. Achla kula chutz beis reva. So the din is hirzik bekula chutz beis reva shalei nana. Since that beis reva he wasn't nana, so therefore it's not considered batal to the karka. It's big enough to be considered an area which is not batal. Afilu hayim became chalomish b'tei chasod. He has a field. and that field is an area which has like a stone which can be planted, and he didn't do anything with that chalamish, and that area is a place which is a base reva. Afilo yemakim chalamish b'teich soda, b'teich hasoda. Hail with nishtamish beikaroyulei is ainly bechazaka because it's a base reva. If it would be less than a base reva, so then it would be bottled to the karka, even if it would be a proper soda, and certainly if it would be a chalamish. And if it's a base reva, it's not bottled even if it's a chalamish. Halacha Yud Zayin. Hirzik echad beilonis v'ochel periseim ve'echad hirzik bekarka v'zora v'ochel periseim. So we're talking about a field that has trees on the field, and the shear of the trees is a sorel beisah. There's 10 trees to a beisah. A beisah is 50 by 50 amas. So normally we say if there's only trees, one person was machzik in it. So by machzik in eser ilonis, which is in a beisah, he makes a chazak in the entire beisah. But over here, there was taka 10 ilonis in the Beisah, and he ate the 10 ilonis for 3 years. But on the other end, there was someone else that planted in the field. That's this din. Hirzik echad b'ilonis, v'achal periseim, and he ate the pears of those trees. V'echad, and another person is hirzik bekarka, v'zora v'achal periseim. And v'chol echad mishneim, and each one of them is tayin, shalkel shaliv ani lekachtav, that each one tayin is, that is his karka. Is eshi hirzik b'ilonis v'achal shalishonim, yesh lehi ilonis. And also the karka shetzichle, he gets the ilonis. He has a chazak in the ilonis, and also the karka which is necessary for the ilonis. What's the karka which is necessary for the ilonis? V'hu kimlei ha'oira v'sali chutza, l'kol ilon v'ilon. So in other words, obviously the makom of the tree and also the place under the branches of the tree is all part of the tree. But over here, besides that, he also has the area for the person that's going to be taking things off the tree, plus his basket, and that shear is a 2 amas. In other words, a 2 amas around each of the trees. That's the shear. So yeshli hilonis, the karka shetzichalei, the karka which is necessary for the ilonis, v'hu kimlei ho'era v'sali chutza l'chalil v'ilon, v'zeh shehirze b'karka yeshli shar karka. So the din is nachamol, if you have a karka and you have ilonis in the karka, normally if there would only be a person that's being magzid b'ilonis, so he would be magzik in the entire karka. Over here you have a person that was magzik b'ilonis and the other person was magzik in the karka. So we say that the person who was magzik in the ilonis gets all the ilonis and also the karka, which includes the mulei eira v'sali, 2 amas around each tree, and the other person which planted the area outside the trees, he gets all the karka outside the trees. V'chein ha'oichel peiros ha'ilon shalishonim, and v'toan al bala ilon ata mechartali. There's talking about one tree, and he went ahead and he says, you sold me that tree. Ata mechartali ilon zeh v'karkoi, and also the karka under the tree. So the din is hareze yeshli karka ku'uvi ha'ilon adateim. So he gets, so even though when a person normally buys an ilon, so he doesn't really get the karka. He only gets the ilon. He doesn't have a right to the karka. It's only if he buys 3 ilonas, the dinim. When you buy 3 ilonas, so then there's a din that he gets the karka. But normally if a person buys only 1 ilon, he's not entitled to the karka. But over here it's not he's buying it, it's the chazaka. He has a chazaka on this ilon, and he's timing that the ilon and the karka is his. So the din is that Hitaka has a schus through this chazaka on the karka which is under the ilon. Halacha yutes. Sdei ilon shahoyu beishleishim ilonis b'teich shalish soim. As we said, normal, a regular thing, that if you have 10 ilonis in the beisah, that's considered the ilonis of the entire beisah. Lepel, he had 30 ilonis, and they were b'teich shalish soim. And lepel in each soh was 10 ilonis. And va'achal asara b'shana rishain. In the first year he ate 10 ilonis of all 3 beisah. And v'asara b'shana shniya. In the second year he ate another 3. And v'asara b'shana shlishis, and 10 in the other 3. 10 in the third one. So the din is hirzik bakil. So he's a magzik bakil. So again, you have 30 ilonis spread over 3 beisah, and lepel he ate 10 each year. Other 10, he ate a group of 10 the first year, another group of 10 the second year, and another group of 10 of the third year. V'hu, that's we're talking about that these 10 that he ate was shi'asarim sha'achal mifuzaris b'chol ha'beis shalish soin. That's number 1. We're talking about that these 10 that he ate were spread out in all 3 beisah, and also we're talking about v'hitziu shar hilonis peiros, that the other ilonis were in meitzi peiros, and therefore there's no shaila. Why didn't you use the other ilonis? So therefore there were 10 ilonis in all 3 beisah that were ready, and each year he had another group of those 10. There were 3 groups of 10. One year, one group of 10 ripened, and the second year, the second group of 10 ripened, and the third year the third group. So Memele he's considered a chazaka of 3 years. So then is lihirzik al mashachal. Then he doesn't have a chazaka, only mashachal. Now the word mashachal is a little bit shver, because in the first case we're talking about he ate 3 1 year, 10 1 year, and then another 10 the next year, and another 10 the other year. So l'chura, he really doesn't have a chazaka of shalish shalom on any of them. In other words, each one is not really a chazaka on the entire field, because lepel, the other ones were mesi peiros, and lepel, he didn't take them. And on the other end, he never ate the same peiros for 3 times. So l'chura, how does he have a chazaka? So you have to learn pshat, that the pshat is a mitzvah shara ilanis peiros v'lei ochlan is leihir ze elu masha'achal, but only if he ate the same ones for 3 years. In other words, if he ate the same 10 for 3 years, so then and the other ones were mesi peiros, so he's not kind of the rest. But on the other end, he's kind of these 10 ilanis is kind of. It's not so galatic the lashon, but that's l'chura pshat. Halacha chaf. B'medvar mamur that you say that when he ate 10 ilanis and the other ilanis he didn't eat, so therefore the chazak is only on these 10 and not on the others. That's only b'medvar mamur mishu ochel hu mixes apeiros. He ate some of the peiros, no, some of the ilanis. Ubazuz u amshara peiros. And everyone else ate the other peiros. So Mamela comes out, let's say you have a karka which has 30 ilanis, and he only ate 10 of them 1 year, then another 10 of them, the same 10 the next year, the same 10 the third year. So the pale, he only has a chazak on these ilanis, and on the rest of the part of the field he doesn't have, because Lepel, he didn't take the peiros of the rest of the field. But we're talking about he didn't take the peiros of the rest of the field, but other people took the peiros of the rest of the field. So the fact that other people took the peiros of the rest of the field, that causes that he shouldn't have a chazak on the rest of the field. That's when we say that he doesn't have a chazak, only has a chazak on the peiros that he ate. He left, he ate 10 peiros of the field of these ilanis one year. The next year again he ate the peiros of 10 ilanis in the second year. Now that is the third year, and he didn't eat the other peiros, and no one else also ate the other peiros. Is hail v'achal ilan mikan v'ilan mikan mikol hasada. He ate ilanis, how they're spread out in the entire field. There were 30 ilanis, and Lepeli ate from 10 ilanis, but those 10 ilanis were spread out in the entire field, and he did that for 3 years. So the din is hilze b'chol hasada. Aval pishul yosef kol peirisa. So in other words, in order to have a chazaka on a sada that has ilanis, you don't have to be actually magzik in all the ilanis and eat the peiros of all the ilanis, but only on the condition that no one else is eating those ilanis. In other words, if you have a sada, which is 3 soin, and lepeil, you go ahead and eat only 10, you have a sada of 3 soin, and you have 30 ilanis, and you go ahead and eat only 10 ilanis of those 30 ilanis, which are the 3 so we say you aren't magzik in the whole field. When someone else ate the other ilanis. So since someone else ate the other ilanis, you only ate these ilanis, so your chazak are only on these ilanis, not on the other ilanis. Mashenkin, if no one else went and ate the other ilanis, so basically you ate 10 ilanis of this field, which taka is magzik 30 ilanis, and you didn't eat all of it. But since no one else ate it, so you're considered, your chazaka of the 10 ilanis, which is spread out in the entire field, is considered a chazaka for the entire field.